What happens when the god of thunder ventures onto the open sea with nothing but a giant's boat, an ox's head for bait, and a plan to hook a serpent that circles the world? This tale begins with a question that sounds like the premise of an epic fable, yet it is rooted in the oldest strata of Norse mythology. In the shadow of the great ash tree Yggdrasil, the gods gather to celebrate a sumptuous feast. The sea giant Aegir has offered to host the banquet, but only if the gods can provide a cauldron big enough to brew ale for all of them. Despite all the treasures hoarded in Asgard, there is no vessel large enough to satisfy Aegir's demand. The only pot vast enough belongs to the giant Hymir, a formidable figure whose home lies at the edge of the world. Retrieving it will require cunning and muscle, for Hymir's cauldron is said to be a mile deep, and the giant is not known for his hospitality. Among the gods, Thor, famed for his strength and courage, volunteers to lead the mission. Accompanying him is the war god Tyr, whose father happens to be Hymir. Their journey will pit them against not only a reluctant host, but also the very creature that coils around Midgard, Jörmungandr, the world's serpent. As we embark on this voyage, remember that the story is not only about retrieving a cooking pot, it is a dramatization of cosmic forces at war and a prelude to Ragnarök. The saga unfolds during preparations for a feast beneath the sea. Aegir and his wife Ran are gracious giants who live in a gleaming hall beneath the waves, and they agree to host the gods on one condition. They must bring a kettle large enough to brew mead for everyone. None of the gods own such a vessel. Tyr recalls that his father Hymir has a cauldron big enough to boil ale for a multitude. Hymir's dwelling lies east of the Elivagar, rivers at Heaven's End, a place where the worlds almost meet. Thor and Tyr leave Asgard, crossing dangerous rivers and ice. On reaching the giant's hall, Tyr's 900-headed grandmother looms over them like a nightmare, while his mother, a beautiful giantess, hides the travelers under cauldrons to shield them from Hymir's rage. When the master of the house returns, his first glance shatters beams and pillars. 9 kettles crash down, but the massive cauldron the gods seek remains unbroken. Hymir's wife reveals her son's visit and the presence of Thor. The giant slaughters 3 bulls for supper. Thor's prodigious appetite amazes everyone. He consumes 2 entire oxen in one sitting. Food stores depleted, Hymir declares that they must go fishing the next morning. Thor eagerly accepts and requests bait, but Hymir tells him to find his own. At dawn, Thor strides into Hymir's pastures and kills the giant's best ox, tearing off the beast's head to use as bait. The god and giant board a small boat and row toward the open sea. Hymir heads to his familiar fishing grounds and pulls up 2 whales with ease. But Thor has other plans. He urges his host to row farther out, away from the safety of the coast. Hymir grows nervous. He warns that Jörmungandr, the monstrous serpent that encircles the world and holds its tail in its mouth, lurks beneath these waters. Thor insists. He's still stinging from a prior episode with the trickster Utgarda Loki, in which he failed to lift a disguised cat that was actually the world's serpent. This fishing trip is his chance for revenge. When Hymir refuses to row further, Thor takes the oars and pulls the boat into deeper waters himself. Thor prepares a thick line and an enormous hook, impaling the ox head and casting it into the abyss. Down in the cold depths, Jörmungandr senses the bait. According to the poetic Eddas, Hymir, the serpent releases its tail and clamps its jaws onto the ox head. In Snorri Sturluson's prose retelling, the scene is similar. The serpent bites the bait as Thor pulls on the line. The world trembles. Waves crash as the serpent lashes the sea into a frenzy, and the boat rocks so violently that the planks begin to splinter. Thor braces his feet against the boat and pushes so hard that his feet break through the hull. He ends up standing on the seabed, planting himself against the floor of the ocean. He hauls the monstrous fish toward the surface, his muscles straining, while the serpent spits venom and roars. The two ancient foes lock eyes, and for a moment the cosmic order hangs in balance. Thor reaches for his hammer, Mjolnir, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Different traditions diverge at this climactic moment. In some poetic fragments attributed to skalds like Bragi Boddason and Ulfr Uggason, Thor actually strikes the serpent, splitting its skull before the creature sinks back into the sea. In Hymir, the god lands at least one blow, but the line snaps and the serpent dives away. In Snorri's Gylfaginning, Hymir panics when he sees Jörmungandr's poisonous maw and cuts the line with his knife. Thor's hammer swings through empty air as the monster slips back beneath the waves. Enraged, the thunder god hurls Mjolnir after the serpent, but only foam and spray remain. Thor's hatred for Jörmungandr is left unfulfilled, a tension that will resurface during Ragnarök, when the two will meet again and slay each other. If you're enjoying this journey through Norse mythology, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next legend we bring to life. Thor is furious. Realizing that Hymir has robbed him of victory, he turns his anger on the giant. Some versions say Thor punches Hymir, knocking him overboard. Others suggest he simply glowers and resumes rowing. The companions return to shore. Hymir challenges the god to prove his strength. First, he asks if Thor will carry the whales or drag the boat above the high tide line. Thor does both, dragging the vessel, the two whales, and even the giant himself across the beach. Unsatisfied, Hymir proposes a new challenge. Can Thor shatter a goblet that never breaks? Thor hurls the crystal vessel at a stone pillar. The pillar crumbles while the goblet remains whole. Tyr's mother whispers that only Hymir's skull is hard enough to break the cup. Taking her advice, Thor smashes the goblet against the giant's head, which cracks the cup without harming Hymir. Defeated and awed, Hymir offers the cauldron. Tyr attempts to lift it but cannot budge it. Thor braces his feet, once again breaking through the floor, and hoists the massive pot onto his head. The cauldron is so large that it drags behind him as he strides out of the hall, but he carries it as casually as a shepherd carries a pail. As Thor and Tyr depart with the cauldron, Hymir realizes what he has lost. Anger flares in the giant's eyes. He summons his kin, a horde of many-headed giants, to chase the fugitives. The giants swarm across the rocky landscape, their footfalls shaking the earth. Thor turns around, calm and resolute, sets down the cauldron and lifts Mjolnir. A battle ensues. The thunder god swings his hammer in wide arcs, each blow sending giants crashing to the ground. One after another, Hymir and his companions fall. By the time the dust settles, only Thor, Tyr and their prize remain. They return to the dwelling where Thor left his chariot and goats. On the way back to Asgard, one of the goats stumbles. Loki is to blame for its lame leg, but that is another story. When Thor finally strides into Aegir's underwater hall with the cauldron, the gods rejoice. Aegir brews ale in the giant vessel, and every winter the gods gather to drink from it. The enormous kettle becomes a symbol of abundance and camaraderie, and the feast becomes an annual tradition.